why do you?
Hello and welcome to Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan,
I'm Ryan.
and this is a podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, I want to talk to you about our Patreon over at patreon.com/Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. We have a bunch of bonus episodes up there. I think the most recent ones, we've been doing quizzes to each other, which has been a lot of fun. Just doing Flick Chart where we rank movies. So if that sounds interesting to you, it's just $5 a month, and no main content is locked behind that, but you do support us. But let's get into this. It's another week of Bondzilla. So we are returning with James Bond on Tuesday with Moonraker from 1979. And guess what? It's another favorite director returning. It's Lewis Gilbert returns, who, did You Only Live Twice, which we both really liked, and then The Spy Who Loved Me, which you really enjoyed. I thought it was good, but let's see how he holds up with Moonraker.
So what number movie is this so far in the series?
Oh God. I think we're at.
James Bond would be better if they start putting numbers in the titles.
I know. I can't count these. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is Bond number 11. If you don't count the Peter Sellers movie, but who's counting? Who's counting Casino Royale?
It just the only reason why I asked is because I was like, I felt like there was always more directors. I'm like, no, that's only just been 4 guys.
Yeah, rotating around, but this is kind of the end of that era, right? Because I think we're gonna start to see maybe some newer directors going for, because this is the last Lewis Gilbert one, and then I know we've seen other few directors kind of lose it as well. So I would say Moonraker even doubles down on the silliness of the past two, gets even sillier this time around. It is full on. When I think I've been saying it recently that this is getting closer and closer to parody. I think Moonraker is the tipping point of self-parody.
Probably so. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I guess my experience with Moonraker, this is actually one of the first Bonds I saw. I think it was my first one. I rented it, at least first classic Bond. I couldn't stand it. I was so bored out of my mind. I really was. I just did not like it. So going back to this one, I wanted to really like fresh pair of eyes, because I was very young then. I had fun. I had fun with Moonraker. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything, but you know what? It's not that bad.
When I was this is only like my second or third time seeing it. And when I was rewatching it again, I remember it being decent. But when I was rewatching it again, I'm like, oh, this is just like checking all the boxes for Nathan. Just like space, sci-fi, lasers.
That's why I'm being nice to it now. Yeah.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love it, but it's not a bad one, but I'm not as enamored with it as I was like with other ones.
Yeah, no, and I think that's totally understandable. But I will say the people are correct on this one, because it was the highest grossing James Bond movie till GoldenEye. The people are not right with this one. This one should not have made as much money, but it's this movie we've talked, it keeps coming up, Star Wars or something. They had this thing called Star Wars Fever, and people just wanted to see space movies. Very archaic times, I guess. I don't know.
It was probably for other space movies. It was probably like Star Trek, like they had nostalgia for that or something like that. That Star Trek would probably be the only thing I could think of that came out in the 70s that people would have cared about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the motion picture was the same year, and I think there was just so much hype with that, and it just kind of worked together.
Yeah, that's the only reason why they would have made a space movie. I'm pretty sure Cubby Broccoli was just like a big Trekkie.
I think I saw it in the behind the scenes.
Yeah, he did the live long and prosper, like that whole thing.
Yeah, I really think it's sad that Bond didn't do that as well. It's like a cool callback, or maybe a connected universe would be even cool.
Yeah, that would have been nice. Or like maybe they could have gotten, or Ricardo Montalban to play like the bad guy for this one.
Hey, you know what? That would have been cool. But we do get Michael Lonsdale in this French actor.
He's one of the better parts of the movie, I'll say.
Oh yeah, I actually really liked Michael Lonsdale. He was like the classic like Bond villain, but not even over the top. Not as over the top as his surroundings. He's kind of quiet, kind of to himself, but just like he's got that evil feeling to him.
Yeah, he's like a tech billionaire. He's got his own space program. Probably owns like a social media platform. They call him Elon Musk. I mean,
oh, oopsie.
Hugo Drax.
Yeah, me. Hugo Drax. Names are interchangeable. That is funny. I didn't even make that connection.
Side note, I mean, not to get into real world stuff, but I mean, I always think about that. I was like, Elon Musk is like this close to being like a Bond villain because he has like all those resources.
That's true. That's actually really true. I now I'm making this connection even closer. And we've even this isn't the first time we brought him up on a James Bond episode.
Last episode, I remember.
Yeah. Interesting.
You couldn't wait to bring him up.
Yeah, I just thought that was a fun fact. But in Moonraker is about like we said, Hugo Drax. He owns like a space shuttle and it's on loan with the United Kingdom, right? And in the first opening sequence, we see that rocket just launch off and basically melt people to death. So that's what we get. And then we get a little bit of an intro with James Bond. This is kind of the cooler part of this intro because the shuttle's all right, I will say the special effects, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. They're good for the time for this movie. I think they did a pretty good job. But there is a giant parachute scene at the very beginning of this movie, and I think it's a really cool way to start this movie. I think it's really an iconic action scene. I just have one issue with it, and I don't know if it's because I watched it in crystal clear HD or not, but you can tell that the stunt double playing Jaws, and Jaws is back, by the way, is not Jaws. He looks nothing like him, and I could tell clear as day that this stunt double was not him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy they used to double as Bond kind of looks like him.
Kinda.
I mean, it's not exact, but I was like, okay, they got somewhat guy that had put the same hair, and then, but yeah, no, I don't think it was meant to be that way. Sort of like the same way when we were doing Dr. No, and it was just like Ursula Anders and Sean Connery were supposed to be naked, but you can clearly see like they have like skin colored underwear on.
Yeah.
So just like that type of thing. Like, I mean, in all these Godzilla movies too, it's like, no, these were not meant for crystal clear HD because you could see every bit of string that's in this movie.
Exactly. None of it is hidden. But what is cool is that they actually do the stunt, and you can tell that they're really there's people actually parachuting, fighting in air. And I think it all looks really cool. I think it's all really exciting.
I was trying to think, and I'm like, I think so far this is probably the best opening to one of the movies.
I totally agree. I think it's iconic. Like, I see the imagery of Jaws in this scene like all the time. Like, I feel like when Bond gets brought up, not only does Jaws get brought up because he's just a famous like villain, but
he's back, by the way.
Oh, he's back, by the way. Yeah, Jaws is back from the last movie. I guess he was such a fan favorite. I'm sure you watch the same making of, but I guess a producer's child that was like, oh, why does Jaws have to be a bad guy? I like him so much.
Yeah, that's they said too. Lewis Gilbert also said too, like they had enormous amounts of fan letters that talk about how much they love Jaws, and like, why can't Jaws just be a good guy?
Well, we'll see about that one as we get later into the movie, but he is the main bad guy. Well, he's not the main bad guy, but I guess he's the one he's in the movie more than Michael Lonsdale.
That's true.
But I think the transition into the opening title sequence is a little rough, where it's like the animated him falling through a circus tent.
In the context of the intro, it's very, very goofy. Like, it just it does totally. I mean, like the last one, it's like this really classy intro, like Bond with like the Union Jack flying. second movie in a row there's a parachute, by the way, in the opening sequence.
That's true.
So, but I just the fact that he fell through a circus tent and he's supposed to land on a trapeze net, it was just like, and it's like the beginning of the movie is Jaws' silhouette. It's like, but now it's like they're trying to make Jaws as like this character that just never dies, and it just he always just finds a way to survive in some sort of weird way.
Yeah, pretty much. That's kind of the humor there. And there's an opening title sequence might be one of the weakest, I think, of the series, especially the song. I don't think it's the worst song. I won't say Moonraker is the worst song, and this is all my opinion, but I just think it's kind of forgettable. Every time I listen to it and afterwards I kind of like, okay, it's not a standout track, and it's Shirley Bassey too. That's what makes it just a little sad.
Yeah, this is what, her third time now?
Yeah, her third and final time.
Yeah, it's good. It's just not very memorable, like you said. I mean, it's not the worst one we've heard so far. Like for me, like the worst one was no, it wasn't Three Blind Mice.
No, talking to Lulu right now, you made the worst one.
Yeah, that was definitely the worst one. But this one, she sings it very well. But to me, it's so very slow and just very just. There's no like, there's no peaks or valleys for me. It's just kind of like we're like,
yeah. But when I want a Shirley track, I want Goldfinger. I want some power to it, and this feels like Goldfinger without any of that power. And it's mainly, I want to say, because the song got passed around. Frank Sinatra was originally supposed to sing this. Once again, another one that Frank Sinatra ended up passing on, just like You Only Live Twice.
I was gonna say we need to do like towards the end, like all these. I don't know if you've heard like all the other musicians that have done Bond songs that got rejected. Yeah. There's so many, but
I think that would be fun to go over too. Yeah. So,
but I was trying to think of like who would even be like a better one. I don't think. I mean, obviously Shirley Bassey's a great singer. It's just,
oh yeah.
I just don't think this was the song. She has such a great voice. It's just I don't think she's showcasing as much as she could be.
No, and I totally agree. I can't think of who would be better, but I'm sure they could have found somebody.
Well, it's a futuristic movie. Maybe they could have gotten like Devo or something, like in their early days.
Not until a little later will we get some like some weirder bands finally entering this. We're still doing like classic, softer songs for now. But man, Devo would be nice. Some maybe not even we'll go back to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, all instrumental electronic music. There we go.
David Bowie. There you go.
That would actually be pretty good. I would be happy with that. But instead we kind of get this one. But yeah, this one, Moonraker, definitely on the humorous side. We talked about the Lewis Gilbert touch. That's here again. He is just, I think he doubles down here. I maybe even too much of a jokey. It becomes, at times I could say it's just becomes not funny and more eye rolling.
Yeah, I really felt that's part of the reason why I didn't love this one as much. And there's just, I don't know if you noticed this too, but like this, I think this is like the quietest Bond has ever been. Like, I feel like Roger Moore had barely talked in this movie.
I didn't notice it while watching, but now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, there's a lot of scenes where he kind of just like walks around and doesn't do much, which is not, I don't know if that's good for Moore. Moore is, like, as we talked about, the funny Bond, and he has his lines, but I'd like to hear more from him. You're absolutely right.
I mean, that's why, I could just be me not loving it as much or whatever, but that's one thing I thought I noticed, but I don't know, like it just, there was a lot of the stuff in here that just wasn't clicking for me, I feel like, and a lot of it too is just a lot of like the real silliness, which we'll get into later. Some of the chase scenes, like there's one particular chase scene that's just so goofy and ridiculous. I'm just like, like,
yeah,
like who would ever like who? Why would anyone think like, oh yeah, that looks great? Like,
I think I know exactly which scene you're talking about. But this movie kind of has a slower start to it, because it kind of starts the way I've been wanting a Bond to start recently, where it's less heavy stakes of like world domination or destroying the world. We get into that later, don't get me wrong, but it's more of like actual espionage. Let me like he's a kind of actually a detective of like, let me figure out what's going on with this missing space shuttle, and he kind of uncovers a conspiracy under everything.
Yeah,
um
it's kind of like Dr. No, because Dr. No was almost like a detective movie, like in the first one where they were trying to figure out,
mhm.
um, who were killing the agents or whatever. So,
Yeah, and I actually, you'll be surprised to hear this, I think, but I think the first 40 minutes of this movie, I actually like the most out of this movie, and I really do. I actually thought that's when it was the most interesting. I really liked the plot. I thought the action scenes were really good. The only thing that I really felt like was weak was and all, it's another Bond girl gripe. I'm not a big fan of Holly Goodhead. We'll just say her name right here.
really,
I think she's a little boring. I think she's a little. I don't think she's bad. She's not the worst. We've had much worse, but I just think she's just kind of boring in a way.
I I actually kind of liked her a little bit compared to the other ones. I mean,
Yeah.
no, she's not like Tracy or the last Bond girl. She's not as good as her, but what I do like about her is that she's at least competent. Like she's like actually
Hmm.
like a genius character,
Yeah,
but
she's a doctor, right? She actually does
yeah,
something.
but yeah, I don't really. I will admit, like in terms of like memorableness, like I'm trying to think of like stuff that she did, and I'm just not thinking of a whole lot here. I mean, she is an astronaut. She does have astronaut training, so she
Yeah.
does fly a spaceship towards the end of the movie. But I don't. In terms of action, I would agree. But in terms of personality, she's definitely a lot better than some of the other
Oh,
ones.
for sure. She at least has like a good personality. But yeah, she ends up kind of being like one of the Bond girls that seems to happen where she's like kind of a bad guy. Well, she's working for the bad guy, but then she ends up on Bond's side. And you know what? I hope they don't fall in love. Oh, you know what is memorable about her? Her name. That name. I
Oh,
can't
why?
I can't believe they did that. I just like it. I think it sounds nice. Holly Goodhead. I don't know.
Well,
It's got like a ring to it.
it's like when you go to school or whatever, and like your teacher tell you, you have a good head on your shoulder.
That's what I was thinking. She's just smart. She's got a good head. Yeah. It's nice in a literary way, I guess. But there's this really, I think it's the silliest scene in this movie. Well, why did I say that? No, it is not the silliest scene in the movie. It is a silly scene in the movie whenever they do meet up and Holly's just like, hey, we got this like astronaut training thing that does G-force. Hey, Bond, you want to hop in this and test it out? And he's like, sure, why not? I'll get it here.
Yeah, that part I did not. I didn't think the scene was awful, but I was just like,
No.
why? I was like, but I did think that. I was like, why would he ever agree to that? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
like it's
He
just such a stupid thing to be like. Oh yes, let me just get in there and just ride it around.
yeah, I've
I'm an
always
enemy
wanted to do
base.
this. Yeah. And then but she doesn't have any, she doesn't even have any like fault, like evil intent behind this. She's like, oh yeah, try this out, it's fun. It's there this our main bad guy has like a henchman and he like dials. I don't know why you would have one of these G-force pushing machines and have the ability to push the dial up so it would murder someone, but they sure have it. They just keep gaining speed. But luckily, he has that like that gadget that keeps popping up where it's like darts that shoot out of his wrist.
That one's yeah, that was a cool thing.
Yeah,
I do like that's a good invention. I do
yeah.
like this one.
I like it because it seems it actually gets some use multiple times in the movie.
And they have all these scenes that keep mentioning G-force, but there's no guinea pigs.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would have been nice. Don't worry.
That's why the movie G-Force was called that.
Really?
And
Okay. I heard there was going to be a gritty live action remake of it.
one could only hope.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope Nicolas Cage comes back. I think he was in that. I'm not sure.
Was he?
I don't remember who's in G-Force.
Zach Galifianakis, Sam Rockwell's the main one, and I think Tracy Morgan plays one of them.
Well, that makes sense. The Tracy Wild. Okay. Let's do G-Force one day. But anyway, while Bond is here, he finds like this nerve gas that like kills humans, but no plants or anything. Oh man. He can't connect two and two together. What could this be used for?
Who knows?
Mm-hmm. It probably won't come back again. But later on in the movie, another really good action sequence, at least in my opinion, aside from a few nitpicks, and trust me, I got plenty of those, is the one where they're hanging on the God, what do you
call cars?
Those? Cable cars, yeah. And they actually have a fight scene on the cable cars, which I think is really cool looking. I like it, especially because you get some shots from above, and it's stunt doubles once again, but you can tell that they're up in the air. It's not a green screen.
Yeah, that I even watching this in the movie sense, it's a pretty terrifying scene for me, just because I mean, I'm not a big fan of heights, and I always imagine that type of stuff, and I'm like, well, if I was in that situation, I'm like, I would be so freaked out, like just
I know,
but that, because I mean, they do show like the behind the scenes footage of how they shot this, and it was two stunt doubles on there, and one stunt double has to throw himself off the side of the car and hang off the side, and apparently he was supposed to have a cable attached to him, but he forgot to put it on, or he wasn't ready for the scene, but they're like, all right, we're ready, let's go. And instead of him saying like, hold on, let me put on this emergency cord, he's just like, oh, I'll just throw myself off the side and hang on with my bare hands.
It's going to be more exciting this way. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and he was just hanging off the side, and then everyone's just like, oh my god, he's like, they said, like, everyone was just like, he's about to die, like this guy is about to die, like right now.
Yeah, and and then we'll have to put the footage in the movie. Oh my god. I'm sure Cubby there was,
do it, bro,
get the footage. But now it's a good sequence. Other than there's like one part where there's a guy down at the bottom bringing the God, why do I keep forgetting? I keep wanting to say chairlift. It's not a chairlift. Cable car down, and they keep increasing the speed. And this cable car is going so fast. And I'm like, in no universe is there a way a cable car they're gonna let like the machinery let it go this fast ever.
No, yeah, and Jaws is there, and Jaws bites through one of the cords, the cables, which is funny. And they said that was actually made out of licorice.
Wow, that's even worse.
You mean better?
No, not black licorice. But it all ends so sillily once again. Like the part where, of course, Jaws is like, ooh, like making a dumb face as he crashes into like the bottom of the lift.
Yeah, it's like he crashes in there, and the big wheel falls on top of him.
Yeah, but then we get the best moment in all of James Bond history. Jaws meets the love of his life at the bottom of that hill. And I'm not even kidding if you haven't seen this before.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what my feelings are, because I mean,
I don't know either.
I mean, it's funny, and it's funny that he found it, but it's just filmed so unoriginally, and it's just so like, so like needlessly silly. I mean, if it was just kind of like she kind of appeared and they just kind of smiled at each other and just like, oh, I'm like, yeah, like that type of thing, that would have kind of made sense. But it was just like they'd literally play like the most generic love. Like
Yep.
I don't know what that. I don't like no 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 no.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like
Yeah, it's like I've seen this before, like in children's movies, you know.
it, it reminds me of like, like if they did this in the movie like Airplane or something like that, where it's just like two characters just stare at each other and just
Yeah.
I'm in madly in love with you now. It was like when we did Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, when it was just like the two
Mhm.
characters who showed like zero love interest, and at the end it's like, wait a minute, I'm in love with you.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. This movie, when I said at the top, I really do think that this is the closest these movies have come to Austin Powers. Like it is just total like comedy. Like what has happened to James Bond to get to this point? Like imagine watching Doctor No and then you're like, "Oh, I'm going to skip ahead to Moonraker for whatever reason." You would have whiplash after.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's insane. And I mean, this plot line carries over. I have to mention it. You know, there's a famous Mandela effect with this. People believe that she was wearing braces in the theatrical run of this movie. It was supposed to be an instant love connection. She was wearing braces, and he was like, "Oh wow," you know, like they come together. And then in subsequent releases, that they got rid of them because people remember there being braces, but that was actually never a thing ever.
Are you sure? I remember braces.
Yeah, you remember braces when you watched it on like DVD,
VHS.
VHS. Yeah,
Yeah.
VHS. Oh my god.
It said on the VHS braces edition.
You had to buy the bootleg from the from like some over the seas dealer.
Yeah, it was like the Japanese like VHS version.
Oh wow, wow! I need to get the braces cut. I'll make a fan
I
edit of it.
But it is funny you say that, because I
For
honestly
real?
did think that. Like I was like, I think she has something on her teeth maybe in
Mm-hmm.
this scene. And when she didn't, I wasn't like, oh, I swear to God, it was something on there. I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I was wrong.
I guess
So
I was thinking it would make sense, right? It's almost the way I think of it. People just most people made that joke funnier in their heads because it's such a like not funny gag. Like you know, it's like it ends up not being that funny, and I think people are like, okay, they couldn't have been that dumb. They it's funnier, right? Because they build a romance, and this is a plot line for the rest of the movie. This is not a one-off joke. Like I thought this happened, I was like, okay, it's over. You know, they did the joke. No, no. Jaws
and,
finds love.
well, because like the weird part about this, because the part I'm remembering wrong is like I thought Jaws like got with the girl, and then I forgot entirely about the boat chase sequence with
Yeah,
like,
which we gotta get
and
to. Yeah,
but I thought it was like he just immediately got the girl and then he went up to space, and then he was kind of conflicted. I was like, oh wait, he still does stuff like in between, like you said, like he is. This is like Jaws's movie almost, like for like in
yeah,
terms of bad guys.
yeah. It's kind. It feels like they were trying to set up a spin-off, like almost like okay, Jaws is going to move on and get his own movie eventually, but he does not return after this one.
Oh God, can you imagine Richard Kiel like having to wear the mouthpiece for
Ever since he
like
said how much like well I mean how much he said that the pain his mouth had every time I saw him with those teeth in this, it's like, oh, I feel bad for this guy. I hope they made it easier for him in this one.
yeah, I don't know if they did. They didn't really explain that in the documentary or not, but
No.
it just but yeah, it was. I do always wonder that. I was like, man, that's got to be just painful.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to talk about. So there's there's two boat chase sequences in this movie.
Yeah, which has been a common theme with with this Bond. I feel like Roger Moore has done so many like boat-based chase scenes.
But he's definitely the most nautical Bond.
Yeah, and James Bond fought a war underwater.
I mean,
I'm sorry, Sean Connery. I mean,
he is a Navy commander, so
that is true. Okay.
but um, yeah. So the one I was referring to earlier was there's a big gondola chase sequence in Italy where they have like in the canals, and Bond is on a gondola, and he the gondola driver gets killed by a guy throwing knives in like a coffin.
Yeah.
And and Bond takes the knife and throws it back and kills the guy, and then miraculously this gondola has an engine and it's like a power boat.
What the heck was this? And he drives it on land.
Well, so does that mean the gondola driver was like an MI6 agent?
I think so. I that's all I can think. Yeah. And hearing the behind the scenes, they did a whole section of this gondola chase scene and how hard it was to get a good shot of this. And just don't do it. It was you don't have to do this. It wasn't a great scene. I'll be honest with you. I don't maybe it's just like James Bond has done this like a few times where like it's just not as interesting anymore.
Yeah, this one, I mean, it was because he gets chased down the canals, and then eventually the gondola, which turns into a hovercraft, which we've already seen again. Like,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
but I mean, it looks so bad. It looks awful. Like it looks like a comedy sketch from like a sketch show, like something like Monty Python would do. Like there's
Yeah.
and a gondola, and then it just starts driving across the road, like all of a sudden.
Yeah, which would be funnier if they did it. It strikes such like an odd tone, I guess.
It's
this is
up there for me for the moon rover chase scene.
yeah, definitely. And this is Bond at one of his most globe trotting. He moves around a lot in this movie. Because he's
It
like
does.
he's in Venice, he goes to Rio de Janeiro, and then he goes to space
California.
too. Yeah, in California. He is all over the place in this movie, and the UK as well. Actually, I do want to bring up that this is the last time Bernard Lee plays M in one of these movies.
Did they say why, or did he just die after this?
Yeah, he got stomach cancer in 1980, I think, and he died before the next one. He was supposed to be in For Your Eyes Only, so yeah.
Well, he would have been in Your Eyes Only if they didn't skip it.
Yeah, that is true. I can't believe that. I didn't even. Did we mention that whenever we?
No, we didn't.
Oh, yeah. The credit to the last one says James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only.
I mean, they were right. It just wasn't the next movie.
Yeah, that is true. And Moonraker, they kind of just hopped onto that one. Cubby there in the documentary was like, we wanted to be more real than Star Wars, and like this is going to be more
What movie?
fact. I don't know. I'm quoting the guy once again. People are referencing this dumb movie.
I know the quote you're about to say, and I thought I just rolled my eyes when he said that. Like,
What he said? Do you have it exactly?
Yeah, he's like, we're not making science fiction, we're making science fact.
That's right.
Like, what?
Yeah. And it is so dumb. And I actually watched this. I watched the documentary in the middle of me watching this movie, which is funny. And he said that, and I was like, okay, all right, let's see how the space stuff goes. And I get to the space scene, I'm like, hell no, what is this guy talking about?
No, I was like, it's like so far from. I mean, it's just they have laser guns or like fighting each other in outer, like they're in orbit, like fighting. So many goofy moments, but
yeah.
And then like I said, there's the other boat chase scene where it's like they're in speedboats, which I'm like, I'm over seeing Bond in a speedboat at this point. Like, there's not much more they can do. Like, they threw Jaws down a waterfall. Like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, which come to find out, those waterfalls were the main reason one of the big reasons they made this movie, because Cubby was like, we got to film here, and it's like not even in the movie. Speaking of which, he actually ends up at the base of the bad guy, and by hang gliding there, and there's that scene where he sicks the snake on him, and he's holding the fakest snake ever. Like, this thing it looks so bad.
Well, they talked about that scene too. Like they would throw like a real snake in the water, and like the snake was like so uninterested, and
Yeah.
the actor, like the stunt man, that he just like the snake just kept swimming on.
They wanted the snake just to kill somebody, and the snake was like, "No, man, I just want to live my life."
He was cold. We wanted to get warm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, God, it I do like here that Drax is oh man, yeah, like Guardians of the Galaxy. Whoa.
Oh,
Oh my god. But no, I do like that he at least explains that he wants to kill Bond in the most elaborate ways. Because we've made that complaint before that the Bond villains are always like, oh, they try to kill him, but they do it in the dumbest way possible. He does explain, he's like, I've tried to kill you in the most fun ways possible, but you're just so unsportsmanlike. Like he's like, I just really want to kill you in a weird way. So I
he's
like
mad.
that.
He's mad that Bond wouldn't let him let him get killed.
But then I do think it's funny that in turn he's like, well, then I instead of being like, I'm going to take these guns and shoot you, he's like, okay, I know the sure way. I'm going to put you under the engine of my space shuttle and fry you to death. um, but I do, that was a fun sequence, and then we finally get to space. We actually, this movie's only in space for like I think 30 minutes of the movie.
Not much. It's about 30 or 40 minutes, and it's you find out like the real reason of why what Drax is up to is that he's trying to build a community out in outer space. So I mean, the last
Yeah,
guy wanted to build a city underwater. This guy wants to build a city in outer space, and it's
yeah,
these weird couples in like gold outfits, and they're
yeah.
just like making out on on the spaceship as it's taking off.
No, yeah, I thought that was so weird. Instead of just showing like the people couples and Bond's like, oh, it's Noah's Ark, they have to show like that long scene of those two kissing. And I was like, what? I don't want to see this. But
My two favorite characters.
who gets invited along with them on the master race trip? Jaws and his girlfriend are there.
Did you say the master race?
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, right? I know that's not a nice way, but he's making a master race. I think that's what Bond even calls it at one point. Because he's gonna kill. Oh,
there's there's only white people on the ship, I think, too.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think they're really pulling like the Nazi feeling of it.
Oh God.
Yeah, and his plans is to use that serum to keep the planet, plants, and stuff alive, but kill all the humans and just kind of restart from space. So, like you said, it's kind of a repeat again. Oh, it's a big bad guy just wanting world domination.
I mean, it's so funny. I mean, like, I guess you don't notice it as much. I mean, we've watched all these movies in a row, but
Yeah,
I guess when you watch these movies as, maybe like 10 years apart, it's just like there's so many callbacks. It's like spaceship gets stolen at the beginning of the movie.
hmm
Like there's boat chase sequences. Um, like random girl gets killed like in the first the first half of the movie.
yeah, yeah. It definitely repeats itself, and that's I'm happy you bring that up because putting yourself in the modern times, like or not modern times, at those times, James Bond movies came out a few years apart, and I mean, James Bond has been around, the whole franchise, the movies have been around for over 10 years at the time. And, people weren't watching these movies over and over again. So it just probably wasn't as noticeable as us who have access to movies so readily.
Well, yeah, and it's like VHS wasn't a thing then, and it's like it might be on TV like every now and then, maybe, who knows? So,
Yeah.
um, it they very rarely get to see it. So it's kind of like what we talked about, like the Godzilla ones, where it it's like, oh, I remember this Godzilla movie when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. I always think about how you talked about King Kong, and like someone was like, you had to wait like 20 years to see King Kong again, and it only existed as like a memory in the back of your head. And you're like, oh, I can finally see this movie again.
Yeah, I just can't. How torturous that would be. Just like you could like this one piece of media like you can never see again. But
God, I don't even know how people judge like favorite movies. Like critics would pick like the best movie of all time after they've seen it once and it's been like 15 years later, but that's beside the point. That's a tangent for another day. But yeah, we get a giant space war. There's a radar, and Holly Goodhead does get a good like showing of her smart side. She does destroy the radar jammer so the Americans can come. And science fact, did you know in 1979 America had a giant space shuttle that opened up like a toy truck, and armies of space astronauts with weapons came out and did war in space. This is a real thing that was happening.
I did not.
Yeah, it really happened.
Wow.
Yeah. But yes, this does happen in James Bond. There's laser guns in this movie, for God's sakes. It's so this whole sequence is so over the top. I think it's fun, but it's one of those things where it's fun, but in the back of my head, I'm like, this isn't James Bond anymore.
No, and that's I'm like, when it starts getting like space battle scenes and like the thing too, because I was kind of hoping like in the documentary they would maybe kind of acknowledge, like there's been a couple of times when they've acknowledged like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done that, which like, you know, like the slide whistle or whatever, they've said that. But
yeah,
like this one I was kind of hoping like, oh well, you know, this one isn't like a beloved Bond or whatever, but since it did so well financially, I guess they weren't, but you know, it's just very biased. I was kind of hoping somebody would be there to be like, well, yeah, like I really wish we wouldn't have done that space battle scene or whatever. But
yeah, somebody being like, oh, the script was a little over the top, because I've even like heard that before. But they're extremely popular, or sorry, it's extremely positive in that making of.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I've said it in Godzilla, I do like my share of camp to movies, but I do think Bond needs some realism in the movie, like where it's just like he's battling in outer space now. I think that's a little crossing the line, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. I think like there's a level of camp that Bond has, but I think of more like in comedy and line delivery and maybe weird gadgets. I think taking Bond into the sci-fi realm is not the correct way, because James Bond is still somewhat grounded, you know, not totally, but that space war is just too far.
Not totally, but I will say a huge positive once again is Ken Adams' set design work in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely insane. This movie looks expensive. I think it cost it cost 34 million, which is more than I think the first 9 movies, first 6.
Whatever, that's 6 in the documentary, yeah.
Okay, then the first 6 movies combined. So, which is you know, it was, and you can see that money on screen, not only in the set design but in the special effects work as well.
Right. I want to see though. Well, now I got to see what beat it that year. Oh, okay. Alien. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yep, that does make sense. Wow, another big sci-fi movie. Obviously, sci-fi was like just such a powerhouse that year because of Alien and Star Trek.
Right. Star Trek was also nominated that year.
Yeah?
No, it was. I'm not.
Yeah, that's what. Okay, yeah. Was it nominated for special effects, or did it
actually?
It
was.
Okay, yeah. Alien was nominated for Best Picture, right?
You know which one should have won? 1941. That should have won.
1941 was nominated. Oh my god!
Best visual effects.
Okay, at least that's fine, I guess. Have you ever seen in 1941?
No.
It is actually pretty bad.
Was Alien nominated? This side portion, but now I gotta look to see if it was. Was it? I don't think it was.
Probably not.
Best Picture, no, it was Kramer versus Kramer, All That Jazz, Apocalypse Now, Breaking Away, and Norma Ray.
Okay, that's a strong year. I've actually seen all this.
Yeah,
Wild.
they're all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, I mean, there's a big fight scene. Honestly, I don't have a lot to say about this other than it's silly. Um, they do get away. I do like the scene where Jaws and his girl get to have a moment on the spaceship, and he says one line finally. I think he says, "Here's to us."
Well, here's to us.
Yeah, thanks, Richard Kiel. You got a speaking role. But they actually save the day because Holly Goodhell and James Bond cannot leave the space station, and he has to actually get them off the space station.
Well, it's funny because like we didn't talk about it, but yeah, Jaws does get converted to being a good guy.
That's right. Yep.
Because Hugo Drax is talking about like he wants like a perfect race in outer space, and then he's like, "So what are you going to do with the people that don't match your image of perfect?" He's like, "Oh, well, they will be disposed of." And then Jaws just kind of like putting two and two together that like him and his girl aren't like the most fashionable
Perfect.
people or whatever. Yeah. So he's just like, then he just has like a moment of clarity, like, "Oh, I gotta stop this guy," type of thing. But it goes so like he's not like, I guess like he's not like like begrudging, like, "Oh, I gotta help this Bond guy now." He's like goes full on like super good guy. Like he's like, because Bond is like, "Jaws, can you help us out?" And Jaws is like, "Ready to go." Like
no, I think that's funny too, because you think it would be like, okay, I got to get out of here. James Bond can be my ally, but it's like he completely forgot for the last movie and this movie that James Bond has multiple times almost murdered him. But this time he's like, yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal. I'm your best friend, Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's total good guy now. But I did like the little moment where Jaws does finally speak. I thought that was kind of a fun moment. And
yeah,
that was nice. And then when the spaceship breaks off, you just see like Jaws and this girl like hurling into outer space. He's like, "Oh, don't worry, it's only 100 miles to Earth." And
yes.
and they just make a brief one-off statement. It's like, "Oh, we found a man and a blonde girl."
Yeah. It's that joke again, I guess, of like they'll survive, or Jaws will
Don't
survive
worry,
anything.
kid. Don't worry, kids. He's gonna be okay.
Yeah, but he's not returning. And all the children in the theater have to see the ending of this movie after loving Jaws. Oh God. Because the ending is, it's something to look at, because James Bond's always have sex, right? But this one, because the him and Holly are floating in space making love, and there's a camera there, and everybody gets to see it. I do love the line that the Americans like, yeah, and the Queen's watching too. And
It's like we patched in a live feed to Buckingham Palace and the White House, and and then just James Bond is in the middle of having sex with a woman, and
yeah,
Q with the line of the century. It's like he's attempting re-entry.
I that did make me laugh. I did think that was a funny line. Yeah, and then of course M is just looking completely
He's like,
embarrassed.
"Oh dear."
And then that's his last line in James Bond movie. I feel like it's a little fitting. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Did we skip over anything important? Michael Lonsdale gets sucked out of a tube at one point.
Yeah. Well, that was one thing I was gonna say. It's like Hugo Drax, like Bond shoots him with a little wrist dart, and
Yeah,
he gets shot into outer space, and then the movie goes on for like another 20 or minutes, just like them like trying to stop the space station from crashing.
yeah,
Just
just trying to figure out how to get off this thing too.
so, I do like, it's not a bad movie, like I said, but I was not digging it like I was other ones. Some good things, like I said, Hugo Drax in terms of the presence is definitely one of the better villains. I definitely think
Mm-hmm.
Holly Goodhead is one of the better Bond women,
Mm-hmm.
and there's Jaws does return. I think he's a little too comedic in here for my taste, but It's not a bad movie. I mean, for me, I would give it a light recommend compared to the other ones.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with this one. Like I said, it's like one of those things where I had fun, but I know that it's not a great Bond movie. I wouldn't say like hop into this one if you haven't seen a lot of the other ones, but I think it's worth a watch. You'll have a good time out of it. Just know that this one is full on Bond camp. It's pretty much The Spy Who Shagged Me.
It pretty much is, yeah. I mean, it's like they do the outer space sequence and everything. So
yeah,
yeah. I definitely think this is considered one of the lesser
oh yeah,
more Bond movies. So.
I think on Letterboxd, ranked like off of average ratings, this is like considered the like not the worst, but it's pretty low. Actually, I want to count that really quickly. Yeah, Moonraker ends up as the 5th worst rated Bond movie. So that's pretty low.
That's pretty low. But we'll see. Let's see how low this series can sink.
Yeah, exactly. The 5 other worst movies we haven't even, or sorry, the 4 other worst movies we haven't even covered yet on the show. So we will see where we go from here. Just going over how we've already mentioned it did very well at the box office, though, despite the negativity. It was this Star Wars thing. I like to think Star Trek thing really pushed this into the stratosphere. So yeah, but James Bond is going to return in For Your Eyes Only.
Are you sure?
I will let you know. I maybe we'll get another one in there. But Ryan, what are we going to be covering on the next episode?
Well, we are going to go down that Toho well one more time. Like I said, we are taking a bit of a pause because we don't have that many Godzilla movies left. So we're going to take a slight detour on a movie that I should have done before Destroy All Monsters. And that will be Atragon. And that is streaming for free over on Tubi right now.
Perfect. All right. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to email us at driveanddoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at DIDFpod. But until next time.
Until next time.
Like train that leads to your side, just like the Moonraker goes in search of his dream.